Recorded Books presents Bluecoated Terror, Jim Crow New Orleans and the Roots of Modern Police Brutality by Jeffrey S. Adler, narrated by Arnell Powell. Introduction. Tyree Nichols, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Laquan McDonald, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and a horrifyingly long list of other African-American citizens have died at the hands of policemen in the opening decades of the 21st century. These killings reflect a century-old police practice of using deadly force against African Americans. During the decades after World War I, New Orleans law enforcers, for example, fatally shot Louis Joseph, Percy Thompson, Charles Handy, Wilbert Moore, and dozens of other African American men. Police officers during both eras beat, tortured, and killed African Americans at dramatically higher rates than whites, and more often employed coercion to extract confessions, shot unarmed suspects, and deployed preemptive deadly force during arrests. These practices bred and continue to breed gaping racial disparities in American criminal justice, inflicting searing social and political ruptures on the nation. Trends in police violence are not identical in the two periods, but they are chillingly similar, grounded in systemic racial discrimination. Bluecoated Terror explores the early 20th century roots of modern police brutality. It focuses on racialized criminal justice in the interwar South because this was a formative era for the institutionalization of such violence. Racialized police brutality was not new a century ago, though it increased significantly and assumed new forms during the decades after World War I. Before the Great War, white civilians as slave patrollers, night riders, and lynchers committed the lion's share of interracial murders, but cops rapidly supplanted them during the 1920s and 1930s. Every form of police violence, from aggressive searches to murders, soared and became commonplace components of urban law enforcement, forging a racial disparity in brutality that has persisted and that roils 21st century America. The rate of fatal police shootings of African Americans, for example, swelled to 5 times the white level during the interwar period and has narrowed but remains far higher. Thus, examining the early institutionalization of this race-based gap sheds light on modern police brutality and especially on the crucial blurring of race control and law and order policing. For early 20th century white Southerners, and many others across the nation, violent police methods for preserving white supremacy seemed justified and consistent with the rule of law. 100 years ago, racial brutality became baked into the core operation of law enforcement and criminal justice. Echoes of this elision of racial dominance and law and order lingered long after Jim Crow waned and continue to haunt modern America. Racial disparities in criminal justice grew rapidly in the interwar South and metastasized across the nation. These differentials became more pronounced and virulent with the modernization of the American police, the expanding authority of prosecutors, and the increasing use of prisons rather than rough justice to punish those perceived to be challenging racial custom and disrupting order. Before the Great War, patrolmen typically inflicted punishment on suspected criminals and suspicious individuals, clubbing them with their billies. When cops arrested suspects, grand juries rarely returned indictments, and prosecutors seldom filed charges and secured few convictions. Even for the most heinous felonies, 3/4 of offenders escaped punishment of any sort. The crime surveys of the 1920s exposed the amateurish, feeble state of American criminal justice and unleashed a wave of legal reform and expansion. Throughout the nation, but particularly in the South, the municipal police quickly gained greater responsibility for controlling crime, but also for
Sample complete. Ready to continue?